was at Tottenham as a 13-year-old, and in them days, different to now, clubs are now picking up players at 7, 8 years of age. It was different then. So I was at Tottenham as a 13-year-old to 16, and of course 16 was the time when the club had to make a decision. They felt that I had a chance, but hadn't done well enough to warrant them giving me an apprenticeship. So I then left school, embarked on a 4-year apprenticeship as a lift engineer, but stayed on at Tottenham as an amateur because I felt I still had a chance. So my working weeks in them days were very much about working day to day as an apprentice lift engineer, training 2 nights a week at Tottenham. So obviously getting initially getting the bus, train to the stadium where we trained in the evenings, and then playing in the youth team on a Saturday. So a very, very busy week, and of course there were some times when I couldn't make the training because we were working late. After the 4 years apprenticeship had finished, of course signed full-time professional at Tottenham, and fortunately for me that it was very quick that I got into the first team, and of course the rest is history. When I look back on the rest of my career, certainly on my coaching and management career and aspirations, I think it was all because of that initial period and the people around it. Some big names, different types of players, you know, your Ozzy Ardiles had played and had won a World Cup winners medal, Ricky Villa, Glenn Hoddle, who was regarded as one of the most gifted players, not only in the country, but probably in Europe, Steve PERRYMAN, certainly the best, you know, captain that I've played under. And what you had in Keith Birkinshaw was a manager that was able to bring all them different characters, personalities, strengths into what was a very, very good side. So I think it's impossible as a young player, you know, not to be influenced by that team and the people in that team and the people around you. I had finished playing at Tottenham around about sort of 30, 31 years of age. I then went and had a year and a half at West Ham, and then a similar period of time at Brentford. And by that time, I knew I wanted to coach. So certainly taking far more interest in tactics or so. And at Brentford, Phil Holder was a manager and allowed me to do a few sessions as well. So at that stage, I very much knew I wanted to coach, and it was about the opportunity. And that's where the hard bit is. It's getting that first opportunity. It's a little bit different now. And of course, at that time, Ozzy Ardiles had just got the job at Tottenham. Ozzy was somebody that I was very friendly with, knew my coaching aspirations, and brought me in as a under-21 stroke reserve team coach to work alongside Patsy Holland. So I had a period of time, you know, that first year working with Pat, and Pat's an excellent coach. So that helped me a lot because it is completely different, because even as regards setting up of a team talks before the game, half-time, you know, these are areas, for as much as you would have been in the changing room on numerous occasions, you know, that is now your responsibility. So it's no different to any other aspects of life. Somebody working in the workshop and now they're in management and they've got to govern a group of players. So the transition is not easy. Certainly the environment I was in helped it for me, and of course you work as hard as you can to make sure that you are learning as quickly as you can. There comes that transition time when when do you become a manager? For the majority of my time there, my biggest responsibility or my biggest drive was to do the best job that I can in the job that I was doing. I thoroughly enjoyed being a coach and the environment around the changes of manager. And of course, every time a new manager came in was another test. Coming towards the end of that period, that desire to want to manage started to become stronger and stronger. And I honestly believe that my transition into management was helped very much by the years that I had and the managers that I worked with in that period of time. What happened? I'd lost my job after 14.5 years. I had 3 years with Martin Jol, and they were successful years as regards league position. I got a phone call around about February time from Kevin KEEGAN, and Kevin, who I'd known and played against, of course, in my travels, but hadn't known so well, and asked, would I come up to Newcastle as first team coach? And my initial reaction was yes, because it was an opportunity to get straight back into football. In all of my playing career, had always been in London. So I think the challenge of particularly going to Newcastle and the opportunity to work with Kevin KEEGAN was something that was very, very exciting for me, and something I didn't really have to think about. The difficulty was the uncertainty of the club at that moment. Everybody was well aware that the owner was trying to sell the club. Players that wanted to leave because the club having gone down and got, of course, relegated. There were players that wanted to be playing at Premier League level, or wanting moves abroad or so. So the things that always remain are the team have to train, and irrespective of what we say about players' highs and lows, and so players always want to train and they always enjoy training, and coaches always enjoy setting up training and taking training sessions. So the things that didn't change is that we trained well in that pre-season. The difficulty probably was determining the players that wanted to stay and fight to get this club back up into the Premier League, and of course the uncertainty of a lot of players coming and going. So that uncertainty was there even going into the first games of the season, and at that stage, I was still caretaker manager, and it wasn't until we picked up some decent results at the start of the season that the club decided to make it permanent. But I think by the time we'd got past the transfer window and it was determined which players were going to stay, fortunately for myself, we had a group of players that were determined to come straight back up again. Although we'd lost some players and a lot of good players, we still had good quality, a strong mentality, and some strong characters. And I think probably without that, we would have found it difficult, because I think you've only got to look at teams that very good teams, very good players that have gone down and have found it difficult to adjust to what the Championship brings, the amount of games, and subsequently have not got promotion back up again. So I think the strength of the team was that, one, as a quality we have, but the strength of character that we had in that changing room. That was my first step into management, and to take over a club, such a great club, and the team that we had that probably would have been sort of close to favourites to come straight back up again, but we've all seen that with numerous other clubs where it hasn't happened. So it was a big season, of course, for the club, and certainly a big season for myself. I have no doubts that the coaching experiences that I'd had in all of them years at Tottenham and working with the manager that I had allowed me to step into what we've already said was a very strong-minded changing room, and the decisions that you had to make, I think it made it easier for me. But of course, that set me on the way on a managerial career, and it's something that that I've always been grateful for. The time that I'd left, we was in a good position in the Premier League. I think what happened afterwards, there was such a good feel or goodwill towards me afterwards. It ended up being, in what is bad circumstances, it ended up being, you know, not such a bad feel afterwards. And I've always been one that has wanted to look forward as opposed to looking back. And I, at that moment, I'd made a decision that I was going to look at that experience as a good experience, as opposed to a bad experience. It set me on my way to management. I felt that I would have offers, you know, after that. You know, the other way to look at it is that, you know, if I hadn't have done well there, then, you know, where is that next job going to come from? So I think at that stage I was confident that I would get offers, and I always wanted to look at it as a good experience, and I've always been one that's kept busy and gone to a lot of games anyway. What you have to do when you join at that stage of the season is and in my managerial career before that, like I say, so my time of course at Norwich and Birmingham and Newcastle, you know, I generally played a certain way. So first and foremost, it's about a way that you want to play, instilling in a shorter period of time, you know, as you can, you know, the system that you want to play, and getting the players to buy into that system. You hope that the reaction of a new manager coming is a help and not a hindrance. And in most occasions, it is a help, because everybody wants to do well. But really, it's about getting to know the team. The team had a difficult period. I was changing a way of playing quite dramatically in the way that they'd been playing up until then. So it's about them responding to it. And fortunately, yes, they responded to it well enough. But what I did know is it was going to take, you know, a summer of working with them throughout that pre-season period, and recruitment. That was what it was going to take to take the club to, you know, the levels that they felt that they should have been, and where they wanted to go to. We lost to Sheffield Wednesday, and in that second leg at the Amex Stadium, for 30 minutes, it was probably the best we'd played all season. So having not achieved it at that moment, you don't know what the reaction will be like the following season. You know, having taken so much and got so close, you know, how will players adjust to that determination? And so how will they be at that moment, you don't know. All you hope is that you've instilled enough into them in that season, and that the disappointment of not achieving what we wanted to achieve would drive them on more in the next season. And we were playing in a division that had a lot of good sides, strong teams in there. But thankfully for us, we started well the following season, and I think I could feel in that pre-season that we had a group of players that were desperate to go again. Sometimes, by the time you get to a certain stage, you are quietly confident that you are, you know, going to achieve it. But it still probably don't take away from the emotion of what you feel inside. And at that stage, it becomes not so much about yourself, but obviously what it meant to the club, the people that employ you, and a group of players that were desperate to be Premier League players. People have asked me, you know, the difference between that and perhaps Newcastle, and I think this was a harder job at Brighton. If I'm looking at, in all honesty, Newcastle was my first, so that will always be my first achievement as a manager, but this would have been a more difficult one. Ultimately, my responsibility is to make sure, having achieved promotion to the Premier League, that you stay there. So you do have to take the emotion out of it, and you have to try and make the right decisions to have a team, or the possibility of a team and a squad that's going to be good enough to stay there. So hard choices, have to be made. Players that you feel, or areas that you feel that need to be strengthened. I thought at the time that we had the makings of a team and a mentality in a team that didn't need too much work. So that's the balance. The balance is the consistency of players that have been playing together for a period of time. Are they good enough to make that step? But of course, tweaking in the areas, and generally the areas, the hardest areas, of course, are the offensive areas. They're the hardest areas to get right, because of course they cost the most money. The most challenging, certainly on the pitch, is the levels. Is that if you are the likes of a team that's only their second, third, fourth season in the Premier League, every game's a hard game, and the levels are so high. When you are managing the likes of a Brighton and a Norwich in the Premier League, Newcastle, obviously many years ago, that the levels are so high that there are, around the corner you play against the top six, and there's that big defeat. And I can remember at Norwich going to Man City, and I think losing 7-0, I think, at Man City. They are the horrible times as a manager, managing at any level, but we're talking now about the top level. And so they are probably the tougher, harder, frustrating team talks, where there is such an imbalance, because all you want to do is you want to be aggressive, get your frustrations out the way, but you're playing against arguably the best teams, some of the best teams in the world. So it's trying to get that balance between not going too far over the top, but letting them know how you feel. There are always going to be, conversations and sort of private conversations that you have with your owners, the chairman, and generally I've always tried to keep them conversations private, as they should be. But it doesn't take away from the fact it was a shock when it happened. I was certainly aware of our form in that second half of the season, particularly at home, and we'd been a lot stronger the season before, and we'd lost games in that second half of the season that against teams that we would have got results in the season before. So certainly not taken away from the fact, and I'm very conscious of that the second half of the season, had been disappointing at home. The other side to that, of course, we'd got to the semi-final of the FA Cup, I think only the second time in the club's history. So probably with that balance, yes, it came as a shock, but unfortunately this is the game, and what you always have to do as a manager is to make sure that you look forward, you look for that next opportunity, look back on what I think was a decent job that we did there, and hope for better things. It's interesting, and probably lots of emotions going on in my head once you're not working. I think when you are into your first or second job, you are desperate not to be out of the game for too long. But I'm probably in a better position now than I would have been a few years ago. I want to manage at the highest level. I've managed 3 Premier League teams and thoroughly enjoyed them experiences, and have felt for a good period of that time, have coped very well in the Premier League. So I'm waiting for that opportunity. I'm waiting for what I regard as the the right opportunity. In the meantime, I shall keep very, very busy. I've always been one to watch lots of games, and sometimes when you have that little period out of the game, you know, it allows you to see things in a little bit of a different way. It allows you maybe to go and watch other sports, and it allows you to look at football. You know, perhaps even go abroad and watch a few games, see how other people work and so on. And it's a really good opportunity, as we keep talking about, for that thirst of knowledge.